Hi folks, so this PowerPoint is just a short one looking at the Gestalt Principles, which are part of the cognitive theory of learning. I want to begin with just a definition of what cognitive theory of learning is. So here's the definition. I've taken it verbatim from your book. A cognitive approach of learning explores how individual differences in knowledge and experience influence the way we interpret the environment and, as a result, what we learn from the interaction. This is very much constructivist. Okay, this is the ways in which we come at the world, and we all do it in different ways, and we interpret the world in different ways. Cognitive theory is concerned with the relationship between the individual and the environment. The same environment is not always seen the same way by individuals. All cognitive theories are constructivist in nature. In other words, knowledge is constructed by the learner and affected by the learner's previous experience. And I think that will, as we look at these Gestalt principles, this will become clearer in terms of the ways in which we approach things. So Gestalt principles, the Gestalt psychologists believe that object recognition relies on form. Okay, so the perception of the whole is greater than the sum of its parts. I left the S off of that, I apologize. I think this will become clearer as we look at some of these figures. So there are 4 principles: figure, ground, proximity, similarity, closure, and continuity. Figure ground. A tendency to group those items that are seen as familiar with the figure and distinguish them from those that are seen as dissimilar, so ground. So this is where we get the familiar and the familiar and dissimilar, okay, so figure and ground. So this was in from your book. So what do you see here, okay? Do you see a vase? And let me point this out to you. So the vase, if we look at it, might go from here. Let me get my pen working. Okay, all right, so see my green, okay? So see, here's one side of the vase, here's the other side of the vase. And so here's the vase, the black part, okay? Do you all see that? Okay, now, let me erase this. And this is where we have to think about the ways in which we approach things and the way in which we see the world, okay? Because now, if I can get all this erased, sorry, the 2 faces, okay, are in white. So here we are. Here's one face, the nose coming down here. All right, so here's a face, and here's a face. Okay? When you see the faces, you can't see the vase. When you see the vase, you can't see the faces. So this is the principle of figure ground. I'm going to show you another rather famous one that you will probably recognize from other areas, but nonetheless, for some reason my eraser is not working very good today. Okay, so I'm just going to skip the erasing part. Alright, so here's one that is used quite often. So there's a young woman here and an old woman. Can you see them? I'm going to give you a second to look. When you see one, you can't see the other, and you have to do a little bit of mind shift to see it. Alright, so here's the young woman, okay? Here's her hair, and here's her eye and her nose, and she's looking backwards a bit. Here's her chin, okay? This looks like it's like a little necklace here. Here's her ear, okay? And this is like a hat that's coming back here, and this is her hair with a nice little feather coming out of it. So do you see her? And this is her chin as well. So she's kind of looking backwards, okay? Now, let's erase that. And now, where's the older woman? Do you see her? Okay, here she is. She's looking this way, okay? Whoops. She's looking this way, okay? And if you look carefully, you'll see that here is her mouth, okay? And here is her nose, okay? She's got a rather large nose. And here's her eye, okay? Looking at you, okay? And this is her other eye over here, okay? And she's looking this way, see? All right? And this is her hair as well, and she has this sort of hat on as well, just like the young woman does. But the perspective is that the younger woman is looking away. The older woman is looking this way. Do you see her now? If you don't, Spend some time with it. So think about what this means for teaching and for education in terms of how our students see things. Okay? They may see the old woman and you may see the young woman, and there may be some problems there if we can't help the students to see things in other ways, or we can help ourselves to see things in other ways. All right, so the next principle is proximity. So when things are close together, they're seen as belonging together. Now, if you look at these dots, the cluster of dots is seen as a whole rather as being seen as individual dots. We look at this as a block of dots. We don't look at it as individual dots of 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, of 36 dots. We don't see it. We see a block of dots. Similarly, we see these as 3 vertical blocks of dots rather than 36 individual ones. Okay? So we see them as a whole rather than as individual. Okay? Think about what this might mean for education in terms of how we help students learn holistically rather than breaking things down into individual parts. So if we learned each individual discrete piece of information in a particular subject, and I'm going to pick on math right now, if we learn, subtraction and addition and multiplication and division, fractions, decimals, okay? If we don't be able to see how they all work together, they become these individual dots that are not connected in any way, all right? So proximity is important for us to think about in terms of the ways in which we help students to think about things holistically rather than as just individual discrete pieces of information. Similarity, the tendency to see objects as belonging to one another, but some may stand apart because of size and color. And again, the principle here is that we see a block of dots, just like we did in the proximity, but now we have different colored ones, so now they stand apart. We see the black tends to stand out more, and it doesn't look the same as the other one, but they're similar. This one reminds me of those wonderful eye exam tests, the colorblind. Well, it is a color blindness test. I shouldn't say it reminds me because it says it right there, where you have to see the figures within. Okay, people who are colorblind have a very difficult time doing that. So the tendency to see objects as belonging to one another, but some may stand apart. We see this as a circle, but we also see a circle within a circle. Okay, and oftentimes there are letters embedded in these that are a different color as well or a different size, and we have to look very hard to see those individual pieces because we tend to see it as being similar. Closure. It's a tendency to see a finished unit. So we look at this and we see it. What do you see? I should ask you before I just go ahead and give the answer, and I'll give you a second to think about it. So I see a triangle, okay? Even though it's not closed, okay? And what do I see here? I see a panda bear, even though it's not closed, but I can make it closed, okay? So this is closure. So this also pertains to, oftentimes to dots. Those pictures of dots that we can tend to see how it closes together. It also works with words. Okay, it's not quite the same thing, but I think you've probably seen some of those exercises where all the vowels are left out or things are spelled backwards. But we tend to see it as a finished piece because we can see. We can fill in the blanks, just like we do here. We fill in the blanks. Continuity. So this is the tendency to see lines as following the smoothest path, rather than seeing separate lines and angles. Lines are seen as belonging together. So when we look at this, we don't see this line, this line, this line. We don't see those as 3 separate lines. We see them as, use a different color. We see them as 1. Okay, or 1, all right? So that's the principle of continuity. So if we think about this in summary, I think I might have left out one. Did I? No, I didn't. I'm sorry. I was dreaming. Okay. So in summary, Gestalt Principles is a set of organizing principles that allow us to see objects. It helps us to better understand the ways in which we view objects. For example, the perception of the whole is greater than the sum of its parts. And so this is kind of what I want you to take from this, that in terms of educational practice, that we have to think about the ways in which our students perceive items or information or objects, and think about how we might help them to see them in different ways, or how we might help ourselves to see them in different ways. So that's it. Thanks so much for listening, and I'll be talking with you again soon.